The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hey everyone, this is Rose Daly, the City Sustainability Coordinator of Sun Prairie, and you're listening to the Sustainable Sun Prairie Podcast, the show that aspires to educate, empower, and engage our listeners in all aspects of sustainability. Whether you are a seasoned sustainability enthusiast or just beginning your sustainability journey, each episode will have something new and exciting for everyone. Let's begin the conversation for a greener community. Hey everyone, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be covering a topic we haven't touched before, but it's something that's close to all of us, food. But not just any food, sustainable food. How do we define it? Why does it matter? And how can our food choices make a significant impact on the environment, our health, and our communities? In this episode, we'll explore everything from sourcing food locally and seasonally to making plant-based swaps. We'll also share practical tips to help you start making more sustainable food choices today. So grab a snack because you will get hungry listening to this episode, and let's dive right in. Joining me today are two absolutely amazing guests who have both committed to sustainable food choices in their own lives. Hannah Best and Tia Tevawork, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
How are both of you doing?
I'm doing great.
Happy to be here.
Good, I'm happy to have you guys. Could you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, so my name's Tia Tevawork, like Rose mentioned. I'm a sustainability intern here at the City of Sun Prairie. I'm going to be going to UW-Madison this fall for mechanical engineering.
Thanks, Tia. My name's Hannah Best, and I'm the Sustainability Program Coordinator for the city, and I'm excited to share a little bit more, I think, as we have our discussion today.
Yes, I'm very excited to hear more about your food journeys. I think we should jump right in with a question related to how we define sustainable when it comes to food. Sustainability is a huge buzzword right now, and people often have their own definitions for how it relates to different aspects of life. So what does sustainable food mean to you?
I think the first thing I think about when I think about sustainable food is locally, like the proximity I am to where this food is produced. So local sources, seasonal sources, and organic sources that aren't using harmful inputs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of building off of that, I think about kind of reducing environmental impacts, which is a lot of where your food come from and what you're eating, right? Like meat has a high environmental impact, and you know, if your food has to fly halfway across the world, it's going to have a strong impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, so food miles, environmental footprint of your food. I think something else we can think about here with sustainable food choices is, again, like you mentioned, how close that food is to you, and are you supporting those local farmers and that local food economy versus maybe food that was shipped in from a different country or different state. So I agree with all of that. All right, so now that we have a definition of sustainable food choices, let's move into why do our food choices matter and how are they connected to our environment, our health, and our well-being. Oftentimes, I think people just, see the food at the grocery store or on the restaurant menu, they order it or they buy it, they consume it, and they're like, yep, that was great, I feel good. And then they just, kind of don't think about it again. It's one of those, out of sight, out of mind things, but there's a lot of resources that go into bringing that food to your plate. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Why do our food choices matter? And then how are they connected to other parts of our lives?
I think, one of the things I think about as far as like connection and food is whenever I'm preparing food, I think about the processes that went into it. So where was this before it was in my kitchen where I'm prepping it, mixing sauces and all that. And so something that I love to do is support local food sources like the farmers market. And one of the reasons I really love that is because it makes me feel more personally connected to the food after I purchase it from the person who took the care to grow it. And I think something else that thinking about food that way has encouraged in my life is a huge reduction in food waste because, I think once you start to really think about all the resources, energy, both from a person and just also from literal energy from farming equipment and traveling, once you start to consider all of that, it makes the food feel, I think, a little more special. And so when you're thinking about the effort that went into it before it was in your kitchen, you kind of want to honor that more and think about the person who you got it from and their hands harvesting it and weeding it and taking care of it. And so I think the more you become more connected to your food when you're sourcing it locally for those reasons.
Absolutely. That's a really beautiful way to look at that.
Mm-hmm. I also think about when you shop locally and kind of in season, how much better the food can be, at least in my opinion and the experiences that I've had. Like thinking about right now, peaches and nectarines, they're so incredibly good because they're in season. I also this makes me think about balanced diets and making sure you're getting the things that you're needing to stay healthy and feel really good, and thinking about these things from farmers markets and talking to people, knowing what these things are rich in to kind of help you. There's so many benefits to having a really good balanced diet, your immune system, your brain, your energy, how you function in day-to-day life. And I think food is just, in my opinion, really impactful.
Absolutely. I think something I'll add here is just kind of thinking of the bigger picture. Why do sustainable food choices matter? And if you think about it, we get to choose the foods that we eat 3 times a day for the rest of our lives. So it's a choice that we make often. I think there's a lot of opportunities to make good choices for the environment, but the frequency of those choices varies. For example, maybe you're going to buy an electric vehicle, but maybe you only get the opportunity to buy a new vehicle like 2 times in your life, maybe 3 times, right? And it's great if you can choose the EV option. But again, that's one choice that you get to make once or twice. Same with putting solar panels on your house. Or maybe even thinking about products in your house. Maybe you've switched from a plastic toothbrush to a bamboo toothbrush, which is great for reducing waste. But how often do you buy a new toothbrush? Like hopefully once every few months, right? But again, it's not as frequent as selecting the food that we eat every single day. So if we can get into the habit of choosing more sustainable foods, and we'll dive into what those habits can look like in addition to shopping at the farmer's market, things like that, then you really can significantly reduce your environmental footprint while also helping your local economy, your local farmers, and ensuring that your body is receiving the most nutrient-dense, healthy foods possible.
I think, something that kind of aligns with the comment you just made is like getting food, how it associates with community and how important community is to sustainability. I think connecting with the people who are producing food in your area is such a great way to not only support the work that they're doing, which is, likely more sustainable than the foods that are sold at the grocery store, while also showing your financial support of their hard work and their commitment to local agriculture. I think, those kind of connections can get really deep if you spend the time to get to know the people who are behind the food. And there's, I think, just something to be explored as far as the communal aspect that forms from local food.
100%. Yeah, I know in my life, whenever I pick something up at like an art fair where I get to meet the artist, I end up taking way better care of that item than I would if it was just something I grabbed at like Walmart, right? Because you're not able to form that connection when you just pick something up at a big box store. So I 100% agree.
Exactly. Yeah. If you have spinach in your fridge that you got from the market, you're not going to let it wilt because you're going to think about the person who you got it from and how, they spent time to make it really nice and grow really beautiful spinach that you got to bring home, and it kind of adds to that importance of the food.
Absolutely. It's also like when you're growing your own food, you're not going to let half of it rot in your garden. You're going to be like, I put so much time and energy and dollars into this. I'm going to make sure I harvest everything and then eat all of it. Or like, give it to neighbors or friends.
Yeah, just thinking about, again, like travel miles and things like that, fewer resources required, right? No one had to drive that truck all the way from Florida or something like that in the winter to bring you these. I think we'll maybe get into animals a little more and the carbon emissions that they produce. But I think sourcing and buying locally is just a really, really excellent option.
100%. I will dive a little bit deeper into the environmental footprint of food choices here, just to help people put this into perspective. It's kind of like when you think about, an item that you might purchase at the store, like a water bottle. you might just, buy it and then fill it up and start using it and not think about it that deeply. But there's going to be materials that go into making that water bottle. Where did the materials come from? You had to source them. How much energy went into the manufacturing of the water bottle? How many miles did it travel to get to that store where you purchased it? And the same is true for our food. I always like to provide this example that really shocked me. And it's thinking about how many resources have to go into raising an animal like a beef cattle versus raising a plant. So if you think about it, beef cattle are typically raised for about 18 to 24 months. And in that year and a half to 2 years, you have to be feeding the cattle multiple times a day, giving it water, giving it antibiotics, providing it with land space, right? So think about all the resources that go into that, the money that goes into that, versus the resources to grow a plant. They still require resources, water, fertilizer, sunlight, but it's typically a smaller amount of time, maybe a growing season, maybe a few months before you actually get that finished product. So I actually was shocked to see that the resources you put into beef versus a plant of the same caloric density versus what you get out of it. So that ratio of resources to end product for beef is 60 to 1, and for a plant it's 2 to 1. So that can help put into perspective that, if you are shifting to more plant-based foods, maybe reducing animal products, you're going to be having a smaller environmental footprint because less resources are required. And again, this is just 2 examples. Some plants require more resources than others. Some animal products have a smaller footprint than others. But it's just important to really put that into perspective and think about, well, how many resources, how much time went into raising this food that I'm now consuming?
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking about kind of a statistic that I heard that surprised me is that there's 43 million cattle killed a year. And thinking about that 60 to 1 ratio of truly how much goes into raising those cattle and transporting them and, even after raising them, getting them to different places or machines that process that meat, right? Thinking about ground beef and other things, someone has to cut that. There's a lot that we really don't think about that goes into it, and it's impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a ton to unpack here. I think we'll have future episodes diving into all these individual topics. But I think for now, let's shift over to discussing sustainable food choices that we individually have adopted and what inspired us or motivated us to make that change.
So I guess I feel like my kind of introduction to climate change and things that were happening in the world were around middle school. I feel like this is when it was a little bit more in the news and a little bit more prevalent, and started looking at it in history and science classes. What's going on? What is climate change? What are greenhouse gases and things like that? And then I had a friend who was vegetarian, and she started kind of explaining to me the things that she was doing and why she was doing them. And I was kind of inspired, right? She's like, this is the impact that it's making. She showed me some statistics. I can't think right off the top of my head, but the impacts that this was making. And I was like, yeah, this is cool, but I wasn't quite sold on it yet. I wasn't quite ready to make a change. And then we talked a little bit more, and she suggested to do it for a New Year's resolution. Try it for a year, try it for a month, kind of see how it is. So I started with that, and for the last 6.5 years, I've been a vegetarian.
Wow. So you really recognize the benefits to your health and to the environment once you started that resolution.
Absolutely, and I had a lot of fun with it, to be completely honest. I don't know, I'm someone who kind of enjoys research and organizing and cooking, so I kind of did a deep dive of, okay, what are these things? What can I make? What can I do? Honestly, it led me to do a lot of other reusable things, right? All my bags are completely reusable, shopping bags. I'm trying to think, my water bottle, reusable. Did a deep dive of what are these more sustainable things that I can be doing. I even went vegan for a little bit. I'm thinking of trying it again, honestly. I think in doing some more research and as we're talking and kind of hearing about your story too, Rose. But yeah, I plan to be vegetarian forever, to be honest, and I love it, and I can't imagine going back.
Awesome. Love that. I have kind of a similar story to share. So when I was in college, I'll be honest with you guys, there was some sort of hypocrisy going on with me. And if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard a little bit about it in other episodes. But I was studying environmental engineering. I was living in this beautiful, sustainable house that I was also contributing to with projects. And I called myself an environmentalist. But I had some problems. I was addicted to fast fashion. I have a whole episode on that if you want to learn more about my addiction and how I overcame it. And I also was consuming a ton of meat and animal products. My 3 favorite meats to cook, which I did quite often, was steak, salmon, and shrimp. And if you've looked into those, they have a very high environmental footprint, but I loved them. I loved cooking them. They were very healthy. They fit with my like protein goals for the gym. But I had this nagging thought in the back of my head, like, you call yourself an environmentalist, but you know these foods aren't the best for the environment. So this all came down to me making a shift in April of 2020 during the COVID pandemic. So I was kind of like trapped in this house with my housemate. You know, we all were in lockdown, and my housemate was vegan. And she was like, hey, let's watch this documentary called Cowspiracy. And I was like, let's do it. So we watched this documentary. And if you haven't seen it, it really details the environmental impact of animal-based foods and the food industry. And my eyes were opened in that moment. You know, what's the phrase? The scales fall off your eyes. And I was like, wow, I've been presented with all of this very convincing data and facts regarding the impact of foods. And now I need to shift my lifestyle accordingly. So in that moment, I said, I am going vegan. And I did a full 180. I made the switch and I became vegan in April of 2020. And I didn't really know how to cook plant-based foods. I was very focused on like meat prior to that. But living with my vegan housemate was amazing. She got to teach me like, here's different protein sources. Here's how to make meals from plants that's not a salad. So that's kind of my journey, and I've been vegan ever since. But yeah, I'm grateful for that moment in the pandemic when I got to really like pause and think about my choices and then make a lifestyle switch for the better.
I love that you guys were both inspired by, you know, people, close friends in your life. I think that that's such a impactful way to be introduced to a change and be inspired to do something different. And it's really great to have a friend to kind of help guide you through that. I think that's just the best way to get started in something.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it was definitely very helpful because my friend, she's like, here are some recipes and kind of like what you were talking about. Here's some protein sources. I think it can be a little like daunting and overwhelming to start, right?
Oh, yeah.
To cut something that you've had in your whole life out of your diet. So I think having the support of someone else can be really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think community around food is so important. I mean, we already associate food as something we do with like our families. We get around a dinner table and eat together. Something we do with our friends. It's such a social activity. So I think it really makes sense that the connections we make with the choices that we make with food are associated with the people that are close to us.
Yeah.
I guess mine is also related to community, maybe not necessarily friends, but like the exposure that I had in, I guess, beginning in when I was just getting done with high school. I worked at a vegan restaurant, and that was probably my first like true experience with vegan food. And it was a cool restaurant because they were sourcing everything farm to table. So they had like a big farm where they were growing all the food that they'd ship every morning into the restaurant. Like they'd have a van deliver it. And it was all made from scratch, and it was all not, I guess one thing that I really liked about it was it wasn't trying to be anything else. Like it wasn't plant-based food imitating anything. It was plant-based food like celebrating plant-based food. And that really it opened my eyes to like what you could do with like, you know, cashew cheeses, and we used like coconut meat that would just turn into like all sorts of different textures and flavors in food that surprised me. And so and also the freshness of farm to table food. I mean, I was just like, that was probably the first time I had a strawberry that was from like directly from a farm. And I was just like, okay, I thought I didn't like strawberries, but this is a whole different experience. I'm obsessed. So yeah, that really gave me a really cool exposure to from scratch vegan cooking that like I was able to kind of incorporate into the practices that I was having at home. And then during college, there's a really cool organization associated with UW-Madison called Slow Food. and they serve a whole food meal that's like also locally sourced, farm to table, prepared in a big kitchen like 2 times a week for everyone on campus is welcome to come. And so with my involvement with that group, we got to visit a local farm, and I was like, whoa, it's so cool here. Like, can we stay here forever? And I didn't really know that I was into that. Like, I guess I had been to petting zoos, and I was like, I love petting kittens. But, like, this is my first time at a food farm, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm really into this. And so after college, I found the Workaway website and did a work exchange on an organic market scale vegetable and pig farm. And that was like pretty much the best experience I've had in my whole life. Like, as far as community goes, you couldn't get any better. Like, just so interconnected, tightly knit community where, like, you know what everyone's kind of like specialty is. And like, there's a tractor guy who does the like tractor work on the various farms, and there's like the guy who raises cattle, and like his whey was repurposed on our farm as part of the pig's diet. And so it was a very circular model of agriculture where like we even picked up like cookie seconds from a local organic cookie producer to use as feed for the animals. So the way that they were farming, while we've acknowledged, yes, animals and emissions is absolutely very real when it comes to like sustainable choices. But this was just a really excellent example of a very sustainable model of raising animals. It wasn't hundreds of animals. It was, 15. Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful to see just like how a farm community at that scale operated in a town where there wasn't even a grocery store. So like we built a farm stand. The farmer I worked for was very passionate about the fact that like everyone should have access to fresh, organic, local produce, and so we're gonna like make that here. And we would like do deliveries to the local gas station for people to pick up. We would do like sometimes catering scale deliveries. So we were like kind of expanding on all these ways that we could be sharing food mm-hmm. with people very near to us, and we were sourcing pretty much everything we ate within like an hour of where we lived. And so that was just an incredible experience as far as like the connection as it is associated with local food, and also the quality with local food. And pretty much it changed my life. Like I was just like, how could you not want to make every choice related to food support this beautiful like system of people who are so passionate and so thoughtful and careful and conscientious about how they're treating the land and the animals that they're raising as food. And now I grow a big garden to kind of keep up with that, which is really fun and satisfying in a different way. But I miss the farm all the time. I would go back in an instant. So I try to stay up with the farmers markets, and I'm not as connected now as when I was working at them, but I'd like to get more connected.
That's such an amazing experience. I feel like everyone should almost be forced to visit a farm like that, maybe as part of a school curriculum, just to have your eyes open to, what does a circular farm look like? How are they contributing to our local community? What resources do they use? How can they repurpose scraps from other businesses? So I love that you got to experience that. And I think that's just such like a value for you, and then that you're able to share that with others.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree it should be a part of the curriculum. I think, to experience stuff like that and realize how much work it goes into it just makes you think about food in a whole new way, and to see it, I think, is probably the best way to learn that lesson.
All right. Well, thank you both for sharing your journeys. I just love hearing people's stories, maybe things they saw or heard that inspired them to make the change, and just like how big of a lifestyle shift both of you have made for yourselves, but also for community and the environment. So I applaud you both. I think now it would be appropriate to talk about challenges we have faced, because making these shifts, it's not always easy. I would love to say it's the easiest thing to do. You don't have to think twice about it, but there are challenges that come with it. So would either of you like to share any of those that you've encountered?
Yeah, I can share some of mine. I think my biggest initial challenge was adjusting some food items and kind of, I don't want to say missing out, but there's certain things that you've had throughout your life that you really enjoy. Kind of thinking about breakfast, one thing that I was really sad about was bacon. It's something that I really enjoyed. So finding a substitute or a different kind of protein or things. I think definitely in the first month or two, there were a few things that I missed, and that was a little bit challenging, and to kind of round out the meals. I also had some issues including protein. When I first started, I went really heavy on plants and not really thinking about adding beans or nuts or these other things that have protein kind of lasting. So initially in my diet, honestly, I was quite tired and I wasn't quite eating enough or getting enough calories daily because I was just doing plants pretty much. And then something else I found difficult, although is better now, is eating at other people's houses. I've noticed sometimes telling people you're a vegetarian can make them kind of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, I do this and this, and they scramble for sustainable things, which is great. I'm glad that they're doing sustainable things and that they're interested, but...
yeah, they almost like take it personally when you just share, like, here's something I'm doing.
Yeah. Or
I've noticed that too.
Or they feel like they're not doing enough, or
yeah.
that they're like, oh, I do meatless Mondays, like great things, but sometimes it can make them uncomfortable. And like I'll often bring my own things too if I'm going over to friends or family's houses sometimes, because people are like, what can I make for you? Or occasionally I'll get stuck with options that aren't great. Like they'll have a salad, or this is just a little bit on education of kind of vegetarian and vegan. Like people are like, oh, you can't have fish? You can't like this, or like, oh, I made this shrimp pasta for you, and I'm like, I still can't. Like that's not part of it. So I think it's interesting, but yeah, some of my family's friends, they keep veggie burgers and things on hand at their house for when I want to come over for dinner and things like that. And I've kind of showed them some of the options that I have, and they're really excited about it, and they eat some of those. So it kind of depends on the person and their comfort level. Some people are really, really excited about it, which I think is often the case. Yeah.
I love that you have friends who are looking out like that and making sure that they have something, good for you to eat. And it's probably also opening their minds to those alternative foods that, they can try. And maybe they end up, sometimes seeing those in their fridge and saying, hey, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to have that even though Tia's not here.
Definitely. It's very kind, I feel like, just in general, like of any dietary restriction, when you have like friends or family that keep things on hand for you to make sure that you're getting what you need. Like it's incredibly thoughtful and kind of coming back to that community, right, of thinking of other people. And yeah, I don't know. It's really awesome that they do that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I faced some similar ones to you just because of like the similar diet choices we've made. I think another challenge I've encountered is going out to restaurants. I would love to say all restaurants have amazing vegan options, but some of them don't. Sometimes the only option on the menu is a French fries or a salad, which is good, but it's not going to fill you up for a full meal. So I've gotten into the habit of reviewing menus in detail before even choosing to go to a restaurant, just to make sure I will have something to eat. Or sometimes if friends choose a restaurant and then invite me to it, if there truly is nothing on the menu, I'll just have to make sure I eat beforehand or I have a meal to eat after. And then when I'm at the restaurant, I'll just order something small like the salad or the fries. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. One other challenge to mention is traveling. So I love to do international traveling. And there's some countries that are way ahead of us in terms of, eating a lot of plant-based food. So it's really easy there to continue this lifestyle of veganism. But there's other countries where it's very, very challenging to even find a vegan meal that's not just like rice and vegetables, something that will really fill you up. So sometimes, depending on the country I'm going to, I will switch to a vegetarian diet just to make sure I'm getting enough calories and protein while I'm on the trip.
I can see traveling being difficult because it's kind of like you're limited by potentially transportation, potentially by location. There's a lot of different unknown factors. You might not be able to like plan ahead where you're going to eat your meals, like whereas if you're going out to eat with a friend somewhere here, you can look it up in advance, but when you're traveling, you're not going to necessarily plan your trip like that. And Also, I think language barrier could kind of come into play there too when you're
Yeah.
trying to figure out like what's in this food.
Absolutely. Actually, I want to comment on that. So when we used to live in Costa Rica, we would say in Spanish, no meat at restaurants. And when you say that in Spanish, they take it as no red meat. So they don't take it as no meat at all. So they might still try to serve you fish or white meat. So that was definitely a language barrier that we had to, just try to explain. So we would start saying things like, in Spanish, no beef, no eggs, no, just being very specific about like, we don't want to eat these foods. Do you have other plant-based options for us?
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe like the phrase no animals.
No animals.
I don't know if that would mean something different, but it makes it maybe a little more comprehensive in what it's excluding.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting though, the cultural meaning of meat. I mean, meat has, in like every country kind of has their different approach to like what they consider meat, or what animals they'll consider food and things like that. Like
Absolutely.
it has a lot of complexities on the cultural aspect of it.
Yeah, even the word vegan in Spanish has a different meaning, or it's not as well known. So we'll say things like yo soy vegano, but they won't understand what that means. They'll be like, what is that? So it's just interesting, definitely the terminology and language that varies in different countries.
Yeah. I think something I think about a lot with these kind of choices is that sometimes, like, especially as the market is sort of proving itself or like on its way there, but sometimes the options can be more expensive, especially associated with like organic and fair trade, which are like really important to me to support. But like not everything, some things are really catching up quickly as far as how they're able to offer them at more of the market rate, but other things are definitely more expensive, which I guess personally I see the value after the work on the farm. I see the value in like why it's more expensive, and that's okay for me. But I guess there's been different times in my life where I need to have more of a budget, and it's not something I can necessarily be super, all on board with financially. But and I think availability too, like really great stuff can sell out fast. Especially with like limited quantities of certain products that are maybe newer to the market but like are such a hit. I know like I love Oatly, and Oatly was, this was like 5 years ago now or so, but like I used to just go around to each grocery store looking for it. It was sold out everywhere, and now I feel like it's like catching up as far as its production goes, but there are other items that are new to the market that it's like, oh, okay, where can I find this? And I think another thing that I think about when it comes to challenges is like doing the investigation on the companies, figuring out like what are their practices, and even at the farmers market, it sometimes can take a little bit more investigation to find out like how is this food being grown? Like, are you using sprays? And I think there's like, greenwashing happening there, but I think sometimes the opposite is also happening where like, I think there's a lot of great producers who like can't necessarily call themselves organic because they're not certified, and there are like financial associations with becoming certified that not every small farm can do. And so sometimes it's kind of like just the research that goes into figuring out like, is this a high quality source? Is this supporting the practices that I want to put my dollar towards when I buy food? And then I think another thing with seasonal and local eating is just like I love adding citrus to almost everything I make. And I think that's an interesting one in particular because that's something like I'll talk about with my friends when I'm like, okay, everything we made was grown here except the lemons. And they'll be like, oh, can you not grow lemons here, or could you? And that's, I think, an interesting kind of topic within local and local food, because there are certain things where like to grow a lemon here, to grow a lemon tree would put so much more resources like with the light that it needs and the heat that it needs, that it would be an unsustainable thing to do here. And so there's like nuances to locally sourced if you want to include things like citrus that add so much flavor. So those are some of the challenges I think of when it comes to like particularly local sourcing.
Absolutely. I want to comment on the higher costs with the organic or fair trade food options. I feel like society is always pushing us to focus on the dollar and get a good deal, find the cheapest price at the grocery store, go when there's a sale. But I think we need to shift away from that mindset. Obviously, finances are very important, but up there with them, we can also consider, well, how is this food produced? And just being able to keep that in mind when you're looking at, maybe the $5 organic strawberries versus the $3 ones that were shipped in from maybe somewhere down south. That's what I've been doing, at least, is just like, okay, I'm going to pay $12 for this fair trade bag of coffee, but I could look up the farm that made this coffee because I have the ability to do that through this fair trade certification. So just always keeping that in mind when we are making these food choices that might cost a little bit more money.
I agree completely. Like, I think remembering with that purchase that money you're spending is going towards like the change you want to see in the world, like less chemicals in soil, less, under treated workers, things like that, that you're supporting when you do buy those like ethically produced products.
Absolutely. I have one more challenge to bring up. And Tia, you had kind of touched on this at the beginning, but it's overcoming misconceptions and debunking misinformation people have about specifically plant-based diet. I think sometimes people will approach it very curiously, like, oh, I actually want to learn more. Like, how do you get your protein sources? And I love having conversations with people who are just genuinely curious. Maybe you're planting a seed, maybe they'll start to try out some of those more plant-based options. But then I also run into people who quickly kind of get defensive, like we had talked about earlier, and they'll almost like attack you and say like you're restricting yourself, which that's not true. There's so many edible plants out there that you can make amazing things with, or they say things like all you can eat are salads, why are you doing that to yourself, or you're only one person, you're not actually making a difference. And I think it's just being able to have facts ready that you can share with them if they're willing to listen. But then also just like recognizing that you are making a difference, what they're sharing isn't true, and hopefully just being able to have a conversation with them about like why you're making these choices. Because at the end of the day, like we're not trying to say we're better than you, because we're not. We all face challenges when it comes to the food we eat. I think it's just being, open to hear what others have to say. Maybe like I would love to hear from someone who said, I wanted to go vegetarian, but here were the issues I ran into. Awesome. Let's talk about it. Like, let's see if there's a way to address those. But yeah, I think that is something you might run into anytime you're making a more sustainable food choice.
Yeah, definitely. I've had someone say, like, when I told them that I was vegetarian, they said that they'd eat more meat now to offset it. And I was like, that's kind of a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
So totally. People definitely have different reactions, where it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, thinking back to how you and I kind of got started, and even Hannah, right? Like, maybe one of these times we do share it with someone and we encourage them to make these sustainable choices or more things, like how we got started. So I think, like you said, if people are interested, it's a great way to kind of spread it and help people get started.
Definitely.
I think that's so true. Like, remembering that your choices and sharing your choices maybe isn't going to not everyone's going to embrace them with you, but the people that do are so meaningful, and that is such a huge impact. If even a couple people make a few changes after you've shared with them that you are making these choices, and now they're keeping different stuff in their fridge for when you're over, like stuff like that has an impact, and they're going to maybe share that with 3 other people. And so even though maybe there are naysayers and there are people who say crazy stuff like what that person said to you, there are, I think, more people who are going to take positive steps.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So now that we've talked about the challenges and kind of difficulties, maybe some of the sad stuff, what are some positive impacts your food choices have had on you, on the environment, maybe on the community?
I think I can echo like kind of what I was just saying, but like I never really thought about soil before my food journey began, but I think about soil all the time now, and how soil is something to be treated like a living thing and cared for, and it's so special, and like the healthy soil we have left is depleting really quickly, and so paying attention to that's like another kind of plug for supporting organic food, even if it may associate with like a higher cost, because there's data showing a USDA study that compares nutritional data across 42 fruits and vegetables. Some data pulled in 1950 and then some data pulled in 1999. And there's been a big decline in the amount of like vitamins and minerals that are present in the soil. And so supporting local organic agriculture, no-till practices, no spray practices, those are really going to put that care towards the soil that it needs to maintain the topsoil we have left, and also try to start rebuilding it. And I think something that has been really meaningful to me is like connecting the quality and the soil health with the quality of the food you're going to get. So like recognizing that like well cared for soil is going to produce a more nutritious plant, and how important that is as far as, you know, what you're putting in your body, how you're fueling yourself. And so yeah, I think the importance of soil has been a big one for me, and really getting to love on soil.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know soil and our care of soil is one of the solutions for climate change. I'll give a shout out to the documentary Kiss the Ground, which dives into the climate science of soil and how powerful it is. But I agree, it's really important to make sure we're putting high quality resources into the foods that we produce.
Yeah, I guess kind of into mine, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's kind of changed how I live my life as a whole, of thinking about environmental impacts with reusable things, and even to where I am now, being a sustainability intern. It's taken my life in such a turn that that's something that I want to do and continue to educate other people on, and learn more about myself, and continue to help make an impact in the world with the things that I'm doing. Even last year, I worked for a fusion company working on clean energy. So it's kind of incredible to think about how much kind of one seemingly little change of going vegetarian has impacted my life and what I want to do with it.
Definitely. I think that's one misconception, is people view these as diets. Like, I'm going to be on the vegan diet or the local foods diet. But in reality, it's a lifestyle change. It's a mindset shift. And I do agree that once you make one of those changes, it's going to have a ripple effect into the rest of your life. Because then you will start questioning, well, if now I really care about the sourcing of my food, what about the sourcing of, you know, my bathroom products, or the sourcing of my shampoo that I use? But yeah, I've noticed that as well, that it's added to the sustainability of my overall lifestyle choices.
I think also kind of what you mentioned, Rose, with kind of diet and exercise, and like your mom's concern that you're not going to be eating or getting enough. I think it's honestly made me better. I think my diet is much better and much more whole, and I'm getting and eating more and understanding the effects of like, okay, I went to the gym today. I need more calories and more protein to help build these muscles. What are my essential amino acids? Am I getting a complete protein, right? Having beans and rice, making sure my body is able to absorb the food that I'm eating. I think I'm much healthier and much better about the things that I eat now that I'm vegetarian than I think I probably was before.
Something else I've noticed is I've become a much better cook. I know sometimes when you're on a more like meat heavy diet, you focus on center of the plate mentality, where you choose a meat and then you build the other dishes around it. So, okay, I have the meat chosen. Now I need a side and a veggie, right? So when I switched to a plant-based diet, I almost felt paralyzed. I was like, okay, meat's off the table. How do I cook? Like, how do I make dishes that will satisfy me? And honestly, I barely knew what to cook when I first went vegan. I was making veggie wraps every day. This is what I had for weeks. I had a tortilla with hummus on it, and then I put grilled veggies in it, and then grilled tofu. But the tofu was not marinated. It was just like I grilled it in a pan with oil and put it in my little veggie wrap. And that's what I was eating, because I was like, okay, this is all I know how to make. But once I learned about the versatility of plants, I feel like I've become such a better cook. For example, some things that I learned is how to transform a block of tofu into like a cheese sauce for a mac and cheese, or into chocolate mousse. You can make that with tofu, which is crazy. Or how to make like Mexican sofritas using tofu. Also, we should talk about mushrooms. They're so amazing. Some of them literally have like a meat texture, and you can like fool people into thinking they're eating like shredded chicken, and it's actually a mushroom. Like, gotcha. And just the way you can like marinate mushrooms and all of that. You can make like bacon from carrots. Like, it's crazy. Like, plants are crazy. But yeah, I will say that's a huge benefit, is just learning how to cook.
I love that, and I love that you mentioned, I mean, mushrooms are such a world to explore, and the textures there, like, and I think that's like a place where like grocery stores really fail us, because you can go to a market and like see textures of mushrooms that you didn't know existed. Like, there's all these different types, lion's mane, oysters, that have these totally different flavor and texture compositions than, you know, basically you can get like portobello and like button at the grocery store. It's so limited. But that's actually also something, like, you know, we can grow pretty easily. Like, people can grow them indoors in their backyards. Like, there's a lot of ways to grow mushrooms, and there's really great local sources for those too if you want some more like variety. So yeah, mushrooms, they're so cool. They're so that's like its own, I feel like, podcast that could be about mushrooms and all the special things they do, not only as a food, but in the world. Shifting my lifestyle also shifted my cooking as well, and like with really prioritizing like local and seasonal. What it means is I'm not really following recipes most of the time, or if I am, I'm making lots of substitutions, and it kind of like led me to see cooking as something that's more creative. And like what I kind of learned was like learning seasoning and profiles for like building a sauce, and how that can like flavor anything. So like you can just kind of like theme the meal, like, okay, if I season this with like mint and basil and ginger and like sesame seeds, and then put bok choy and carrots and snap peas, like you can just kind of mix anything together. And like they think there's like if it grows together, it goes together is a phrase that I've heard people use. And I think that's also a really great way to think about food, like opening yourself up to being willing to be creative in the kitchen, rather than, I mean, I think recipes are amazing. I've learned a lot of amazing things from recipes, but also like letting yourself go off the book once you feel like you have some of that foundation, because I built that kind of foundation through just experimenting in the kitchen. And like, yeah, sometimes I made some stuff that tasted crazy, and sometimes I still do. I might have brought a crazy dish for the picnic today, but like, it's a fun garden, you know, everything that's growing right now. And so I think thinking about food in a more, you know, like, it doesn't need to look like, well, this is lasagna and this is, you know, I'm trying to think of just a classic meal, that potatoes and broccoli and meat. Like, it doesn't need to look like that. I think it can look like whatever, you know, you have. And also that kind of, I tie that back to food waste. I think that that's a really kind of an approach I take to food waste, is like, well, if I have it, it's going to go in this meal, and that's okay. It doesn't matter if it's not on this recipe. If I have spinach, it's going to become a part of the sauce. Things like that you know, you can kind of go off the book if you start to explore in that way in the kitchen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I honestly, like, I want to come cook with you sometime, because I feel like I'm very, like, type A, must follow a recipe to a T, and I want to get more into the experimental cooking. So you should give me some tips sometime.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think what I could share off the top of my head is really, like, if you can figure out, like, flavor profiles that you like. I have certain kind of go-tos as far as, like, okay, if I put, like, soy sauce and sesame oil and ginger together, it's going to have this kind of, like, tangy, salty vibe. And so, like, I kind of, it's like been a journey of just like thinking about food more as like not having strict rules about what does and doesn't go together. And just kind of trying it and being willing to be like, this isn't like the most delicious meal I've ever made sometimes, but then like you'll come up with a flavor combination that you're like, whoa, I've never done this before, and now I'm making this sauce for everything.
Absolutely.
So like, yeah, thinking about it I think it shifted for me when I started thinking about it as like an experiment a little bit.
Yeah, it really is like an entire like science for cooking. I think I also took a deeper dive into the science as well when I switched to the plant-based lifestyle, because I remember learning that you don't need an egg to make a baked good, you need an emulsifier. So, but we're always taught, like you said, like, okay, this is what fits in the cookie cutter, an egg for your cake, or, you know, animal butter for whatever dish. But yeah, I feel like I've just learned, again, back to the versatility, aquafaba can be used as an emulsifier. A chia egg, like what's that, right? Like things we've never heard of before because we all kind of were just stuck in this like very traditional way of cooking. All right, so now I kind of want to shift gears and talk about some tips for someone who might want to make a change to their food choices. So what would be your best tips to give to someone who maybe wants to start following a vegetarian focused diet, someone who wants to start shopping more locally and supporting local farmers? Any tips they should follow or any swaps they should make?
Yeah, I have kind of a good one, kind of sticking on our food. I found it to be really fun to try foods from different cuisines that are already vegetarian. I found when I've tried to kind of, like we've talked about, substitute things, I'm like, maybe I don't want to put barbecue sauce on tofu. It's not very great. But I do a lot of Indian cuisine. A lot of it is already vegetarian, and it's focused on the flavor around the plant and enhancifying that. And I just find it really, really good. So I think maybe not even just thinking about it from a sustainability, but just as trying something new and something fun. There's a lot of great things. I would recommend looking at your grocery store at some of the ingredients more closely. A lot of things I was surprised to find either had meat in them or didn't. And realizing, oh, this is a great plant-based option. I already liked this. Maybe I can look at other products from this line that's also vegan and vegetarian and things like that. I feel like maybe just taking more time in grocery stores and when you're shopping to really look at these things can be a great way to make a few switches.
Yeah, I love what you said about cuisines that feature vegetarian meals kind of as their staple, because like, you know, in our culture here, it's very much a meat and potatoes kind of approach to food. And so to look at those cultures that are and have been for a long time celebrating plant-based. And I think something else you said that stood out to me that I really agree with is like celebrating plant-based as its own option. I think there are great alternatives and substitutes, but I also think some of my favorite stuff that I've had is just like, I don't know, a great sauce that's been made with all plant-based foods that surprised me with its flavor, and it was like something I had never had before. So like trying something new, not only in the sense of that it is plant-based, but just like don't feel the need to compare it to something that you've known and have like maybe a personal connection to because it's your great grandma's recipe and your family always makes it. Like these kind of like heavily, like we've been talking about, food is very part of our culture, it's very part of our communities, and so to like let yourself have that whole new experience to celebrate a plant-based meal just as that and not as imitating something.
I think also when we explore those plant-based meals from other cultures, we're introduced to new flavor profiles. Like, for example, in American cuisine, cinnamon is often used in sweet dishes, but it's often used in savory dishes in Indian cuisine, which is kind of a new like flavor for us. Like, oh, I always expect something with cinnamon to taste sweet, but then when it's in a curry, it's like, oh, this is a really nice like warming spice to have in this velvety curry.
Totally agree with that. The surprises of different flavor profiles that you can find, and like how that adds depth. Like you might not identify that there's cinnamon in something, but it adds such a complexity to the flavor.
Now I'm really in the mood for some good Indian curries.
Yeah. Another thing I think of with someone who wants to get started is like kind of take the time to reflect on the choices you are making and in reflecting, see where it would be easy for you to make a change. Like, are there things, like, for example, I used to always have dairy creamer in my coffee, but I never liked how it really tasted. I just was like, coffee's too much on its own for me. And so that was like an easy thing for me to swap, where I was like, okay, I actually I prefer the flavor of alternatives. So if there are things that you are doing maybe just out of a habit without thinking about them that you don't necessarily like really enjoy, that could be a good place to start. You can kind of like, you know, start slow and build yourself up from there, and know that like small steps, like, you know, creamer is something I use every day, and so to use an alternative every day instead is a big difference, even though it seems like a baby step, and kind of like acknowledge your progress as you're able to make it. And I think something I have written down, but like we've really talked about it, but like commit and cook with friends, like make this something that's fun. I don't know about you guys, but like I feel so much more encouraged when, you know, I have someone alongside me we can talk about what's working, what isn't, what's fun. And so especially with something as social as food, I think having community in it that you're making changes with is really special and important.
100%. I think another tip I'll add is, and Tia, you'd kind of mentioned this, but start reading labels at the grocery store to understand where your food is coming from. You know, just get in the habit of it. Just educate yourself. And then maybe if you see something shocking, like something coming in from a different country in the middle of winter, maybe it's not the best time to buy that food item. I was shocked the other day. I was at the grocery store and there was a huge display of sweet cherries. And I'm like, yeah, it's summertime. You know, cherries are being grown right now in Michigan. Yeah. This is a great time to buy them. I look at the container and they were imported from Washington, like other side of the country. And I was like, I can't buy these. They traveled too far to get to me. It's something I'll have to save for a different day when there's a more local option. So I would say get in that habit, and not just for fruits and veggies, but also looking at, you know, where was that maple syrup produced? Is it one that's made in a different state? Well, is there one that was produced in your state? Read those labels, look for that, and maybe let that be the deciding factor instead of the price tag, like whatever one is on sale.
Yeah, I think that taking that time to look into what you're eating, understand the ingredients, understand the sourcing is a huge important thing that we've kind of thematically has come up, I think, again and again in the conversation we've had today. And I think something kind of along with that I would encourage someone to do is to visit and tour like a local producer, do a you-pick strawberry farm, do a farm tour where organic produce is being grown, and meet the people doing the work, because I think it just allows you to draw all those connections yourself, to see it, and to think about it in a new way. And it's also just a nice way to get out and enjoy the summer season. And we're lucky to be in an area that's so rich in agriculture and local options.
100%. And I feel like you'll be surprised how many like urban farms or local farms are actually in your area. Just do a quick Google search, and I'm sure some of them might either offer tours already or would be happy to bring you out to tour around, or maybe you can even volunteer. I know a lot of them will take volunteers and then they'll pay you in produce, which I think is the best thing.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, that's a really great way to get started too, I think, is like many farms have the option to do like a CSA based work exchange, where you're like committing X number of hours a week to work, and then you get to take home a box of food from, you know, that was harvested that day. And it's a really, smooth pathway to a local seasonal diet, because you're just going to be given this box full of local seasonal stuff that you get to use and play with in your kitchen. And I think that's such a great way to get started. And it's also a great way to get a taste for the energy that goes into food.
Definitely. I think a couple other tips from my end is to set yourself up for success. So I feel like this isn't a choice that you can just wake up and start doing it. You need to if you want to go vegan or vegetarian, get some cookbooks or recipes ready that you will enjoy, or maybe they meet your protein intake, but just make sure you're prepared in that way. Or before you go to the farmer's market, actually make a meal plan for the week and a grocery list so you can be actively shopping for items that you are going to be using that week for those meals, not just being like, oh, cool, look at this super bright green head of cabbage that looks so beautiful on this farm stand. I'm going to buy it. But then you bring it home and you're like, oh, now I have to figure out what to do with it. That could lead to a lot of food waste. So I would say be prepared with a list.
I guess I want to make a point that you don't have to go completely vegetarian or vegan. I think it could be fun to just one meal. I think you have on here, Rose, one day a week.
Yeah.
Right? Making small choices that kind of build up can make a really big impact.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. And I think if you observe your habits, you can kind of see you might be surprised oh wow, I do eat meat in every meal. Is that necessary? Am I over consuming that? I think like you said, you don't necessarily I'm an omnivore, but I'm a conscious. I don't know. That's a corny thing to say, but I pay attention.
Intentional omnivore, yeah.
I'm paying attention to if I'm using meat, how I'm using it, and where it came from, and making sure it's I guess honoring the life that is, and also the source, and not just kind of carelessly including it out of just habit or default, I think is a good word, not defaulting to it, because I mean, like we've said, that's just sort of how diet has been structured in this country, very meat-centered, and you can decenter it in your own life without deciding to completely remove it if that's the way you go, and still make those more consistent choices to be alternatives or plant-based.
Definitely. Yeah, we had talked about swapping dairy items for plant-based items. You can also swap your eggs, no longer buying the eggs at the grocery store, instead buying your eggs from the local farmer, or buying the locally raised beef. That's an option too. That will have a really big impact on the environment.
Yeah. And on that note, this is maybe a cliff note to add, but what is being available locally is expanding. In the past, it's been really hard to find, for example, local grains. Buying flour, you couldn't really do it locally. But there's a huge movement right now for that to become local. And I just discovered in my little town, there's someone doing growing and milling local wheat at their farm stand.
Dang.
So I started getting that there. And
that's so cool.
Yes. And so I think we've kind of touched on this, but do some Google searches if you want to get connected with local sources, because you'll be surprised if you Google honey near me. You'll just see dots all over the map, because there's people doing it on these scales, and they might not even be at farmers markets. They're doing on maybe a different scale than that, but reach out to those people, because they'd probably be happy to have you out and share what they're producing with you. And so the options are expanding, and you'd be surprised at what you can find locally if you look for it.
All right. If either of you could go back in time and do something differently at the start of your food choice journey, what would it be?
I guess I wish I would have recognized my passion for agriculture sooner in life. I felt late to the party to discover that about myself, and it was shocking. I feel like my friends were like, "What? You want to work on a farm?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's so great. It's so meaningful. It's so easy to understand the value in the work you're doing." And I think that if I don't know, I think I wish I would have learned that sooner, because it really, after connecting that part of myself, has just changed my whole outlook on the world, actually.
I'm in the same boat as you. I felt very late to the party. I wish I would have known about everything we've talked about related to food earlier in life. I think it isn't something that's usually built into the school curriculum, at least not when I was in elementary school. It's not really something that my family talked about a lot. We would talk about growing food in the backyard, or like, oh, make sure you shop at your farmer's market in the summer, but we never really talked about why that was important. So I think something that I want to do in the future is just be more open with like any kids I end up having, just teaching them like, here's, you know, the food we're buying, here's why we're buying it, here's foods that we don't eat often, and here's why we don't eat them often, just to make sure that they have that education and then they can make an informed decision moving forward.
Definitely. I think more education about kind of the environment and things like that. I'm feeling hopeful though with kind of the work that we're doing here, and you particularly, Rose, with the solar trees and getting kids involved, and slow-mo and doing that at schools. Like, I think we can bring this to the front and help educate people, and I think they really will start making these choices once they know about it. Definitely. Especially kids.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Yeah, and I do think it's really inspiring to see, like, I guess even seeing what I was kind of referencing earlier, like the expansion of available products at the local grocery store, I think is showing such an evident shift that people are making these choices. And I think we live in an exciting time to like see a rapid expansion as far as like options and availability.
For sure. I think the only thing that I would do differently is I was really strict with my food options. And I think, Rose, you had a note in there, but like eating things that I didn't like or want to necessarily eat, like with tofu, creating some crazy recipes, like my barbecue sauce on tofu. I really did do that, right? Like being really strict with this and not having a lot of fun with it. I wish I would have kind of embraced it and had a bit of a better time in the beginning, but I think I got there in the end pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for being picky with your food choices. You don't have to eat the Beyond Burgers if you don't like them. You don't have to eat Just Egg if you don't like it. Just find what you like so that you can enjoy your food journey. All right, we are almost at the end of the episode. My final question for you is, how can someone stay motivated to keep making sustainable food choices over time?
I think trying new things and keeping it fun. Like making it a goal, like I want to try this new thing, I want to try a different kind of cuisine. I think that's great. I think kind of as we've talked about it, talking to other people, watching cooking videos, things like that to help you stay inspired. And then I think ultimately it's a little easier once you've done it. Once you have some meals, you're like, okay, I know I have these 5 things that I like, that are easy to make, that are good meals. I think it can be a little bit more comforting and easier to stay motivated because you're like, wow, this is really good food and this is easy and I can do this.
Definitely.
I definitely agree with not, making yourself eat things you don't want to eat, and also making it fun and kind of like trying new recipes. I think that's important. I think this is also a really great time for that because there's so many people on on social media making these like 30-second videos that you can watch and learn like a whole new technique and like combining foods that maybe you've not tried combining before. So I do think there's some fun in watching, food videos and stuff like that. And I also think it's good when you're starting to make new choices to like acknowledge the progress you've made and like maybe reflect on a recipe that you now make once a week that you had never made before a year ago or something like that. And also just recognizing that by making these choices, you are being part of like some of the values that you want to stand behind, and that this is a really consistent way to keep committing to those values.
Yeah, kind of to echo that regarding values, my best tip is make sure you're viewing whatever choice you make as a lifestyle choice and not a diet. Again, it's all about shifting that mindset. I wrote down a couple of examples because sometimes we can get stuck in this restrictive mindset for whatever food choices we have made. So a restrictive mindset would say, if you're going vegan now, you would say, well, I only get to eat plants now. But an intentional mindset would be, wow, there's over 80,000 edible plants at my fingertips. Like, I can make so many amazing things with this. And then thinking about eating seasonally, a restrictive mindset would say like, dang, I only get to eat strawberries in the summer months. But an intentional mindset, which you had kind of talked about, Hannah, was saying like, wow, that locally grown, fresh off the vine strawberry that I only get to eat this summer was definitely worth the wait. So I think just again, viewing it as that lifestyle choice, not the diet, will help you be more successful and stay motivated with the choice that you have made.
Totally agree.
All right. And with that, we are at the end of the episode. Do either of you have any final concluding thoughts to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, keeping with that mindset, have the most fun you can, learn the most, I think that's ultimately the goal.
I agree. I think, I think that one perspective, like maybe the restrictive perspective, like what you were just saying, is to say like, well, now I have all these food rules or something like that I'm following. But like, I think it can be fun if you view it as a challenge to like learn new cooking techniques and try produce you haven't tried before. And so yeah, viewing it as a place to explore and not like don't see it as rules, make your own rules, or don't have rules. Like I feel like you can do it in a free form way that just works for you and your preferences.
100%. Yeah, my concluding thought is just, you don't have to be perfect. You can start today, and every little switch makes a difference. All right. Well, thank you both for your time today. This was such a delightful conversation. I loved hearing about your journeys.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Thanks for having me too. I liked getting to know personal parts about you guys that I didn't know through our food journeys.
Definitely. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Sustainable Sun Prairie with your host, Rose Daly. I hope you enjoyed this episode and uncovered something new about sustainability. As always, you can subscribe to our podcast and listen anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and you can listen live on 103.5 FM The Sun, WLSP-LP, and on demand on the Sun Prairie Media Center app. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as our contact info, please visit the show notes. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.